Soviet chess legend and outspoken Kremlin critic Garry Kasparov has made his first trip to Ukraine since the Euromaidan revolution earlier this year. Kasparov visited Kiev and laid flowers at the site of the Maidan protests to honor activists that were killed there earlier this year. The chess legend is better known today as an outspoken critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin. In 2013, he fled Russia after attempting for almost a decade to create a genuine political opposition movement to challenge the Putin regime. While in Kiev, Kasparov sat down with TSN Weekly's Alexei Bobrovnikov to discuss international attitudes to Putin's Russia and the crisis in Ukraine.
It was, this Merkel quote about Putin when she said this spring that he's probably irrational, or has lost his contact with reality, something like that. What do you think of that?
I mean, she was right and she was wrong. She was right because from her perspective, as the Western political leader elected by people, following, the rules, Putin's behavior was irrational. It definitely belonged to a different reality. But Putin lived in his own reality, which is a normal reality of a dictator who always needs a mythology to sell his case, his rule to his subjects. So Putin's logic was a logic of a different kind of a political animal, and I was quite surprised that Merkel simply didn't understand, because she tried to judge Putin by the same measurement as is accepted in the civilized world.
Using her own psychology,
no,
her own patterns.
She tried to pretend that Putin is a leader who belonged to the same family of democratically elected leaders, like a G8, and she was shocked to realize that Putin's behavior was so different, and that's why she came up with this assessment, which again was wrong, since it was based on a false scale of evaluation.
Some things may have changed since May. We had the MH17, we had lots of tragedies happening here. So how do you think Western leaders, and you most probably have a contact with them, how do they take Putin now? What kind of animal do they consider Putin is?
Now, I guess that, reluctantly, they recognize the fact that Putin is a lost cause. That with Putin, there will be no diplomatic solution of Ukrainian crisis. Putin can't afford to show weakness. Putin's algorithm of staying in power will be based on the foreign aggression. So they didn't want to recognize it. They tried every trick in the book to sort of soften this blow, and just to find a form of compromise, not to lose face, and all in vain. So right now, I believe that they are slowly building a new defense line. So they understand that Russia, as long as Putin stays in Kremlin, will be an enemy. The world is actually moving into the new phase of the Cold War. Still, they are quite indecisive. Still, we see a lot of weakness. We should realize that Putin's lobby in the West is well paid. It's well connected. Many politicians, even in the governments, they have their vested interest in dealing with Putin. So that's why the reaction is slow, but I think we now can see the steady movement into a new reality, and I think it's a good sign.
Is it movement really irreversible? What I'm trying to say is, as a chess master, you know far better than me about the game of sacrifice. And do you really think that Ukraine is not a figure that can still be lost as a sacrifice by West?
Look, from the very beginning, I've been confronting the view that has been promoted by some of the Western intellectuals and even politicians, that Ukraine had no choice but to accept this reality, to be a buffer state, and there is a Russian fundamental historical interest in the region. And my reaction was adamant. It's just the nation of 45 million people cannot be reduced to a buffer state. It's a choice of Ukrainians to belong to Europe or to Eurasia, and if the choice is made, no one is in a position to treat them as a second-rate nation. Still, we could see some Western politicians looking for this form of compromise, but these voices are getting weaker and weaker every day, because it's clear, even for some of the Putin's advocates, that Putin will not stop. So this is making concessions, trying a policy of appeasement will not stop Putin, and he will continue his quest for creating chaos. Also, giving up Ukraine and accepting Putin's plans to divide Ukrainian state will create a very dangerous precedent, because Ukrainians' territorial integrity has been guaranteed by the 1994 memorandum in Budapest.
God damn, but it's not worth the paper which it was written on.
This memorandum contained very important conditions. Nuclear weapon versus territorial integrity. Recognizing the fact that nuclear weapon becomes the only guarantee for your integrity, territorial integrity, sends a very dangerous signal to everybody, starting with Iran, and then to all other countries. It's not just Europe or Middle East. Look at Asia. China is on the rise. China is definitely posing a threat to its neighbors. Do you think that Japan or South Korea will be relying exclusively on America to protect them against Chinese military might? Or Japan will decide that it's time to build its own nuclear weapon and to rebuild the imperial fleet? So I think the Western leaders recognize that it's tough, it's dangerous to oppose Putin, but the alternative is even worse, because the choice is to allow chaos to rule the world. And as much as the bureaucrats in European Parliament or in Washington, they hate conflict, but they hate chaos, inevitable in case of not confronting Putin even more.
And for Ukraine, this game of sacrifice, losing Crimea for winning time, that's how our authorities put it. Winning some shaky peace in the east, again for winning time to rebuild, for me it doesn't sound very effective.
Look, it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and just to criticize politicians for making decisions that could be reversed, and by doing something differently, maybe we could have expected better results.
That's what we're up to. Sorry, sir, we're journalists.
I believe that from history lessons, we should recognize a simple fact that any delay of opposing the aggression pushes the price up. The cost of confronting Putin today is very high. I don't know the outcome, but I know for sure that tomorrow the price will be higher. The day after tomorrow will be higher. The price
for those who oppose Putin,
exactly,
not for him.
No. The price for those who oppose him. So the price of confronting Putin's aggression in Crimea in February was high. But if it was done, most likely you could have saved thousands of lives that were lost later. Because again, it's not a logic of a democratic elected leader that you have to consider that's the different interests and look for the compromise. Dictator grabs everything that he believes he can take. He's not asking why, he's asking why not. So that's why opposing Putin, starting the military confrontation in Crimea probably was a better option, providing Ukrainian government was in the position to do something at that time. And also, we should not forget that the West at that time was dead against any military confrontation. So it was quite, you needed a strong leader. And I guess it was quite a political turmoil in March in Ukraine, in early March, to have someone who was in the position to make a decision to start confrontation. Though I believe that if done so, if it was done, it could have saved thousands of lives and massive destructions that took place in the East later on.
For you and for me, who were born in the USSR, made in the USSR,
Born and raised.
Yeah, born and raised. This is almost clear. But for the Westerners, why do you think Maidan, or well, why do you think Putin is so strong in Russia and Maidan is not a chance for Russia now? Or you think that they will have their own Maidan?
No, Maidan is though it's a word that now is accepted in dictionaries around the world, it becomes a political symbol, but it's very much Ukrainian symbol of resistance. And I think these, with all the similarities between Ukraine and Russia in the post-Soviet Union, there was still a fundamental difference. Government in Russia, the supreme power in Russia, was virtually unchallenged since Yeltsin shut down the parliament in 1993 and then ruled as a president, but still, using the constitution that gave him enormous power to control all other branches. Here in Ukraine, government was never treated as sacred. You had many elections where government, when people in power lost in a fair process. So Kravchuk lost to Kuchma, Yanukovych lost to Yushchenko. So again, Ukrainians never treated the government as something that is untouchable. So that's why Maidan is like a natural reaction to the government's abuse. Yanukovych was not Putin, so that's why it is in the reaction against potential Maidan in Russia would be much harsher because Putin has no allergy for blood.
But you do think that Yanukovych was following Putin's commands?
Absolutely.
Shooting people here?
Yanukovych was not a politician that came out of the blue. He has a history. I mean, I'm not talking about his intellectual or his moral qualities, but we knew that he was never, he was never very keen to use brute force, just to push it through. So 2004 was very clear that the Kuchma and Yanukovych were not in the mood to start massive confrontation. So what's happened here in Kiev a year ago, I think, was a result of clear intervention of Kremlin, and that's why Yanukovych ran away, because it was not his game.
So that's really the point where we can say that this was a benchmark. This was a start of the Ukrainian-Russian war.
Yes, absolutely.
The aggression against Maidan and not annexation of Crimea.
Actually, let's say Putin's regime, because I would still prefer to separate Putin's regime with all Russians. So because there are many people, not as many as we want, but still there are many people in Russia who believe that Anschluss of Crimea and war in the east of Ukraine, they're just crimes of Putin's regime, and eventually Russia will have to walk a long distance to sort of to heal these wounds. But it's when we look at Crimea's annexation, I think it's worth mentioning that most likely this plan was already well prepared and was sort of hidden in the desk of GRU or KGB departments. And I think that it's, again, logically speaking, these plans were probably prepared for potential loss of Yanukovych in the 2015 elections. I think Putin was preparing for incursion in Ukraine if Yanukovych would be out of control. But things happened spontaneously, and I think Putin, being dragged by the success of the Sochi Olympics, so being in the center of the world, I think he decided it was time to actually punish Ukrainians for overthrowing Yanukovych and cutting this country in pieces, as he was planning to do for a long time.
So he's not really a schizophrenic. He's just over emotional about what's happening there. Yeah?
No, but it's again, this is his world. It's Merkel or Obama could think that he was out of his mind, but Putin never believed, and he said it many times, that Ukraine was a real state. Putin often repeated. And again, why the Western leaders ignored what he said, that Ukraine was not a proper state, and it was all, it had to stay in the Russian sphere of dominance, and any attempt of Ukraine to move away. And by the way, he said it today even at his speech in Moscow. He said, you know, Russia was not given sort of fair hearing when Ukraine decided to join Europe. I mean, why Russia should be even consulted, you know? So it's a sovereign issue, but Putin never believed Ukraine or any other former Soviet republic was sovereign. It's like, you know, it's a different view of the political system. So like it's like a Ptolemaios, you know, this is the system with Earth in the center, and suddenly he's told that no, Earth is one of the planets. No, it's impossible. It's heresy, and it should be punished by the most severe standards.